Yeah, but depending on the context and the situation, you might have a chance for dialogue, and I would say the dialogue would be ideal, right? That would be the best. But in some cases, you won't have a chance for dialogue because you're in a group situation or whatever. So, I mean, sometimes you'll be one-on-one, sometimes you'll be addressing the whole group. So depending on that, the main idea is not only to understand what our opposition is going to bring up and the correct factual answers, but the other important part is the way that we tell that narrative, besides just the facts, right? To understand not only the power of the narrative of our opponents, right? Narratives like, big government is a bad thing. It's, bureaucracy inefficient and so on, right?
Yeah.
Or taxes are horrible.
Yeah, and a major factor of that is getting an understanding of what is behind the statement that's being made. And that's where the dialogue, if you have time to talk and discuss with someone, you can really get to an understanding of where they're coming from. But a lot of times when a question is raised, you can get an idea of where that framework is coming from so that you can recognize how to understand that in order to respond. For example, the friend who says, I want government out of healthcare. Maybe they initially just say, I don't like healthcare, but then I don't like government involvement in healthcare, but then they say that there is some specific example of how it interfered with their ability to provide healthcare to their family or in their business because of some change. Then you can get an understanding of where they're coming from on that to be able to then turn it around to, if we have a single payer system, it resolves that.
Well, I just want government out of my life.
Oh, I get it. Okay, so this is a point where we're saying whether you're in a group or an individual, you have to make a decision. Are you going to let this one person in a group that speak derail the conversation? Oh, and you can just say, well, again, I understand. Some people don't want government so involved in life. What I want out of my life is my insurance companies. They're in the way of every day of what I do, and the denial of patient care.
Nice example of jiu-jitsu.
That's it. So it's
Understanding where you're coming from.
right. Let you go a little bit, derailing. If it's one-on-one, but there's a point where you can. If it's one-on-one, we don't have to get everybody. Stop trying to get everybody. Go back to the initial point. Yeah, I hate to correct you, but we need 51% of the votes. We don't need that many. We need 50% plus one vote. We don't need everybody, and we won't get everybody. How many people here think we're going to get everybody? Okay, good. Thank you.
Going back to the question about the government too, I would also add, as we've seen in those examples, right, of people saying, get the government out of my Medicare, people don't understand it, right? First of all, not only is Medicare popular, it's efficient, but also there are other things that government provides. People like their public libraries. A lot of people like their public schools, depending on the city. People like their fire department. Some people like their police department. Imagine what it would be like if you didn't have the fire department. You relied on volunteer fire department. It's really important to hear them and understand that narrative and do that jujitsu, because if you just give them the facts, it's not going to matter to them.
Right. And I've had it go both ways. There have been some people that have brought that up, and I talked to them for a minute, and I just realized they're completely lost on it. I'm not going to be able to convince them, and so I move on. But I've had other people who, they brought that up, I talked to them for a minute, and I realized that the issue that they're focused on has nothing to do with whether it's government or not. It has to do with something else. So then I'm able to redirect them.
Okay.
You have to listen.
That's what we're talking about with jiu-jitsu here.
You have to listen long enough. I was carrying Big Nurse in front of a car lot in Corvallis, and I didn't know that I was standing on the parkway and sinking into it. It was very wet. The owner of the car lot came and said, "Please get off my property, and you can't stand there. That's my driveway." Yes, of course you can stand on the sidewalk. And I don't like your issue. It was 101. Said I don't want to pay more taxes. So I went back 2 weeks later without Big Nurse and talked to him. And I listened for about 5 minutes. He said, I work 6 days a week here. I rarely get to see my kids. You're asking me to pay more taxes. That means I have to work more hours. I see less of my kids. I don't want to pay for those people that aren't doing their part, they don't take care of themselves. And he did use some interesting imagery too, which helped me understand the fear behind his anger. I don't want the government holding a gun to my head telling me I have to take care of that slacker or that illegal. So it was interesting to hear all of that, and of course I listened, and I was able to get in a little bit after I listened for 5 minutes that the money raised by Oregon will qualify for much larger amounts from the federal government that will allow the hospital to take care of that patient so that your premiums will not have to rise as high. Well, all right. And I'm also mentioned that most of the people receiving Medicaid are employed. Well, I guess I have to accept your figures on that. So it's good to have some of those in the back of your head to use. It won't always take the, the convincing. It won't be convincing always, but I think I moved that car owner maybe 10 degrees.
By the way, one of the best things that we have is that documentary, Fix It.
Yeah.
Because it's from a business point of view, right? And get people to think. I mean, there are multinational corporations, right? Intel that has employees all over the world. Nike has employees all over the world. I mean, do they go bankrupt because they're doing business in countries where there's universal health care? No, in fact, it's easier for them, right? And there are stories of some of the car companies, right, that are, they decide to close down plants in the US and do business in Canada because they save money on healthcare. Any other questions?
Yes, what companies are those?
I'm trying to remember. I can't remember offhand. I have something I wrote for. I believe that Ford was one of them. Also, there was a recent thing last year with Warren Buffett's vice president, right? Who is a Republican. What's his name? Starts with Munger, right? Who says single payer? We have to have single payer. I mean, these are people that are not liberals. They're not whatever. I mean, they're business people, right? And from their perspective, they see that our current system is unsustainable, right?
Well, so did Trump before he became
Yeah. Yes.
I was going to ask Mike, where can you get statistics about the Oregon Health Plan and who's on it?
I think, well, I've just gone to the Oregon Health Authority and maybe typed in Medicaid clients, or there's any number of ways you can get at it. But that's, just Google what you're interested in.
There are two good sources of Oregon figures. There are two good sources of Oregon figures. One is the Oregon State Insurance Division of Consumer Affairs. But really, I found the best source is to be Charlie Swanson, who is the chair of the HCAO Legislative Committee. You send a note to HCAO and say, how many people are on Medicaid in Cook County? Charlie can find it, and he can give you documentation.
Legislation at hcao.org or legislative at hcao.org. Either one lands in Charlie Swanson's box.
What was the most effective opposing argument that was used in Colorado that made the vote go so bad?
I think from what I understand, it was basically taxes. They were just saying, your taxes are going to go up. And even though, of course, our taxes are going to go up, our savings, totally more than offsets that for most of us, because we wouldn't be losing our wages for healthcare, right? Or paying out-of-pocket costs, deductibles, co-pays, all those kind of things. But still, right, that narrative defeated them, scared people about high taxes.
Hang on, Jim had his hand up first.
David hasn't talked.
All right, go ahead, David. Thank you.
We had a talk with the Colorado Care people, and by the way, the president of Colorado Care was T.R. Reed. And they they botched the organization. They admitted that they didn't go out and do their education. They said, before you even think about passing a petition, make sure you go out and do your homework first, get people lined up. They didn't get NARAL on board. They didn't get the unions on board. There were just too many people actively opposed to them, and they say, do your education first. So that's like us.
What David said, the biggest point was that there was not enough of that groundwork ahead of time to get some of those key organizations on board that need to be on board. We have some of them on board in Oregon already that were not on board in Colorado, and we need to make sure that we don't lose any of them that are key and critical to this.
And speaking of that, I am going to be working on a resolution for Portland Public Schools, and then we want to take it to other districts in support of single-payer healthcare. And I think the timing is perfect right now, given the strike in West Virginia happened largely over healthcare, cost of healthcare. And especially since PAT and OEA, our local and state unions, are members of HCAO and support this idea. Our city council, our metro representatives, and county representatives have all passed resolutions in support. We can get our school district here in Portland and other school districts to do the same. And if you're interested in helping us with that, please let me know, because that's a new campaign we're about to start. Thanks. Other questions? Anything else?